Alright guys, another day, another strength. This is a very important video. I'm going to title it, I think, Filtering Your Fitness Content, but this really applies to anything that you see on YouTube or like even in the news or on social media or anything like that, right? And you got to refine your BS filter, right? You got to know what you're looking at. So this starts with just being okay with undertaking the goal of personal development. So in this context, I'm going to stick to the fitness thing for the purposes of this video. But if your goal is to become the best either coach, or you're trying, like if you're just trying to coach yourself, for example, right? You're trying to become the best lifter possible, intake a bunch of information and apply it to yourself, then you have to do this. You have to think critically. You have to know what's BS, and you just, not even know what's BS, but just like know the motives behind what it is that you're listening to, for example. So you have to understand the context of what is being said in the video that you're watching. So one example is understanding the person giving the info, and I'm a starting strength coach, so I'll use Rip as my example, right? Rip is biased towards getting novices strong, and then he's biased towards working with people that generally tend to not train hard enough. So everything he says is going to be tailored around getting those novices to actually train hard and get strong. And so you've seen adverse effects of this online, and there's been criticisms of this, of the starting strength program, right? And a lot of this is because there are people that don't actually need to hear that advice, but then they take it and run with it. So there'll be guys that are like already a little bit chubby, for example, doing GOMAD and like getting fat, and then like running their squats into a wall and then backing off and then like running into a wall again and just like getting injured and having these like terrible experiences. And so a lot of that is those people don't actually need to be so extreme about it. Like they should still run starting strength. Obviously, I'm biased in that regard, so even I have my biases, obviously. But yeah, that's one example. Another example, Dr. Mike Israel, he's a hypertrophy guy, right? So he has great info, but it's all tailored towards hypertrophy. And so like a lot of times, if you don't have that background, you see a video pop up and it'll have some title that's like, you know, this stretch mediated, like this, you know, some kind of like super ass to grass, like high bar squat is the best squat period. And then it just like, it leaves out the fact that it's for muscle growth. Whereas Rip will say like, you have to lean over and use your hips when you squat. And that's the best kind of squat there is, period. And it's like, you know, if you're trying to grow your quads, that's not the best kind of squat. And if you're trying to get as strong as possible, then Dr. Mike's squat is not the best kind of squat. So you have to understand where that's coming from. As far as, you know, being a novice versus advanced, I've talked about this before, right? Lots of things can work, especially as you're a novice. And then even as an advanced lifter, lots of things can still work. And people are going to be biased towards their own personal path that worked for them in their training. So what I mean by that is, depending on who you watch on YouTube, like there's Greg Doucette, for example. So he, and like, I don't have as much experience with this personally, but I've heard from other YouTubers that what he does tends to work because he is either a combination of the two, like on drugs and genetically gifted. So he maintains at 9% body fat and gets stronger and more muscular at that body fat percentage, right? Which is pretty darn hard to do for most people, from what I understand, which makes perfect sense, right? But that's his bias because that's what's always worked for him. So that's where he's gonna steer you and tell you what to do. Just like, you know, for myself, like I started with starting strength. I got strong first. I did a lot of, you know, squatting, compound movements, obviously. And then recently I've gotten into more isolation stuff. And then I put on a lot of body fat to get really strong, and it worked for me too. And so is that the best path? Like, maybe not, but that's the only one that I know because that's the only one that I went through, because you really only go through that once, right? Same thing with, there's other lifters too, like Alex Leonidas, he has a great channel, check him out. But like he kind of, you know, started out with just compound movements, got strong with those, got most of his gains from that, as he says. So that's going to be his bias when you're listening to him. And then a guy like Natural Hypertrophy, for example, did a lot of compounds, but wound up having an underdeveloped physique in some areas. And so he now preaches a lot more on the isolation side. He still uses a lot of compounds too, I should say. But, you know, go check out his channel if you want to see what he has to say. But like, just understand that whoever you watch, they're going to have their own personal biases based off what they've done and what's worked for them. So you have to learn to think critically and not just like blindly follow every single thing that you're told. Yeah, start somewhere and see what happens, right? So like, it can be tough to have all this info coming at you and not know what to do. So just like I've said in previous videos, you have to start somewhere, just start doing something. Because everyone that's telling you to do these different things, that's how they got there in the first place, is they started with just something basic, and then over time it evolved and it became what it is. Like Louis Simmons didn't just start training and was like, you know what, I think I'll do the conjugate method, because that seems like the best thing that is gonna work for my lifters. Like he probably started off with like the classic linear periodization and then found the point where that didn't work and then thought critically about it and then tried stuff out and probably failed a bunch of times and then finally found the thing that actually works. So you have to take ownership in your own journey, right? Care a lot about your training and your own fitness development. Pull levers here and there. So treat your training like an experiment, basically. Adjust variables and then incorporate more variables. Once that slows down, you can incorporate more, and then just ultimately succeed in the long term. That's what we all want to do, right? But yeah, anytime you incorporate something new, you better have a really good reason or explanation as to why you're doing it, and always relate it to first principles and your goal, right? So like stress recovery adaptation and specificity are of particular importance. So for example, like it's really easy to start doing, let's say, a press specialization program. So you're like, all right, I'm gonna press 3 times a week and I'm gonna squat once a week and deadlift once a week, right? And you start doing that, and then you start noticing that, like, you know, press is fine and everything, and then all of a sudden your squat, you're getting certain gains, and then you're like, maybe I could get better gains if I squatted twice a week, and then you start squatting twice a week, and then you're like, man, I feel like I still have more recovery on the table for my quads. I'm gonna squat 3 times a week, and then you start throwing in like more squat variations, and then all of a sudden it's interfering with your press because you're squatting before your press, and then it's like, hold on a second, slow down. What was your goal with this program? It was to get your press as strong as possible. And then that allows you to kind of like dial things back and not get caught up in all these different pieces. Like, stick to your goal here. What's the one thing you're trying to do? And just be as focused as possible on that for a certain period of time. And as long as you're still making progress towards that, just keep doing it, right? And then I guess if you get bored and you get tired of doing it, then you can stop. But that's how I feel about that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, say something in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, goodbye.